welcome back or welcome. If this is your first time here, you found a quiet place for dark stories, rain outside the window, and a voice to keep you company through the night. Get comfortable. Let the world fade away. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And is this a late night for you or an early morning? And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future nights here. Story 1. What my ancestors buried in the attic. I am only alive today because I finally understood the rules of my own family's house. My name is Lee. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away, leaving me her sprawling Gothic revival home on the edge of a forgotten town called Briar's End. It was the house my mother fled at 18, the house she refused to ever speak about. To me, it was an inheritance, a project, a chance to start over after a messy divorce. The realtor's photos showed dust motes dancing in slanted light, ornate woodwork, and a certain melancholic grandeur. What they didn't show was the silence. A silence so thick it felt like walking through cold syrup. I moved in on a damp October afternoon. The first unsettling detail was the smell not decay, but the sharp, cloying scent of dried roses and old paper, as if the air itself had been preserved. The second was the placement of every single mirror. They were all covered with heavy, dark velvet cloths, secured with tarnished brass tacks. And the third, which I only noticed after signing the papers, was that every exterior door had 3 deadbolts, all of them on the inside. The first week was a blur of unpacking and painting, trying to drown the house's pervasive stillness with the noise of normal life. I'd play music, but the old walls seemed to absorb the sound after a few minutes, leaving a hollow quiet in its wake. I'd hear the floorboards creak in patterns that didn't match my own footsteps of the slow, deliberate shuffle from the floor above when I was in the kitchen. I chalked it up to an old house settling, to the wind in the eaves. But the wind doesn't whisper your name. It was on the 7th night that I heard it for the first time. I was reading in the parlor when a breathy, feminine voice, close as if standing just behind my chair, sighed Lee. I spun around, heart hammering, to an empty room. The voice wasn't menacing. It was mournful, almost pleading. Have you ever had that feeling where you know you're being watched, not by something hostile, but by something profoundly sad? It's a different kind of chill. It seeps into your bones. Things escalated slowly, logically, as if the house was introducing me to its rhythms. I'd find the velvet covers on the mirrors slightly disturbed, a corner flipped up, as if someone had just peeked underneath. The smell of roses would intensify in one room, then vanish, replaced by the metallic tang of old ice. One afternoon, I found a single perfect black rose on my pillow, its stem wrapped in a brittle yellowed ribbon. The most disturbing event, though, was the writing. I'd wake up to find faint, cursive script scrawled in the condensation on my bedroom window. Always the same 3 phrases in an ink that looked like rust, never an answer, I called my mother. It was the first time Id reached out since the funeral. Her voice, usually so strong, became a thin wire of panic. Lee, you need to leave that house. Now, tonight. Don't ask questions, just go. Mom, what is this? What aren't you telling me? A long pause, filled with staticky fear. Your grandmother, she wasn't just a collector of antiques. She was a keeper. Some doors in that house should never be opened. Some reflections should never be seen. Just listen to the house, Lee. It will try to teach you. But for God's sake, don't look in the mirrors. The line went dead. She didn't pick up again. Her warning gave me a perverse sense of purpose. I wasn't going to run. This was my house, my legacy. I needed to understand. The clues pointed upward to the sealed attic. The shuffle of footsteps was always directly above my bedroom ceiling. The key, a long iron skeleton key, was hanging on a hook beside the attic door, as if waiting for me. With a trembling hand, I unlocked it. The stairs groaned upwards into utter blackness, and that smell of roses and cold iron poured down like a physical thing. The attic wasn't a storage space. It was a shrine, a museum of my family's hidden history. Dozens of covered mirrors lined the walls, their shapes ominous under the cloth. In the center stood a large, ornate table covered in strange artifacts, tarnished silver bowls, bundles of dried herbs, jars filled with dark liquid, and things I didn't want to identify. And there were photographs, hundreds of them pinned to a massive corkboard. Women. All women with my eyes, my jawline, spanning generations. Some looked serene, others terrified. At the top of the board, in my grandmother's elegant hand, was a title, The Watchers. That's when I found the journal. My grandmother's, bound in cracked leather. Its pages revealed the horrible truth. The women in our line weren't just prone to melancholy or strange intuitions. They were anchors. Our family, centuries ago, had made a pact with something that existed in the spaces between reflections. It offered protection, prosperity, in exchange for a Wardina woman of our blood to live in this house and maintain the boundary. The covered mirrors weren't to keep us from seeing something out. They were to keep the watchers, reflections of our own ancestors trapped in their moment of death, from seeing in. Their sorrow and confusion was a necessary barrier. The 3 locks on every door were for the nights when the boundary grew thin, and other things my grandmother only called the hollow ones, would try to get in, drawn by the light of a living soul. The rules were simple, sacred, and had kept the world safe from a breach for over 200 years. Keep the mirrors covered. After dark, stay in a lit room. Never acknowledge a whisper directly. And on the night of the new moon, when the boundary was weakest, barricade yourself in the central hallway with salt and iron until dawn. I had been breaking every single rule. Reading this, a terrible calm settled over me. This was the false safety, the moment where I thought knowledge was power. I understood the game now. I could fix this. I spent the day meticulously recovering every mirror, checking the locks, preparing a sanctuary in the windowless central hall. As dusk fell, a profound, unnatural quiet descended. The house was holding its breath. I lit every candle I could find, drew a thick line of salt across the hallway entrance, and clutched a cold iron fireplace poker. For hours, nothing happened. The silence was absolute. Maybe, I thought, I had done it. Maybe the house recognized my intent and would grant me mercy. The climax began with a sound like shattering glass, distant at first, then cascading through the house from above. The attic. One by one, the candles began to snuff out, not from a draft, but as if pinched by invisible fingers. The temperature plummeted. Then came the whispers, not one, but a chorus of them, overlapping, desperate, angry, sad. "See us, free us," she failed, "let us in," the salt line began to vibrate, then scattered as if blown by a fierce wind. The deadbolts on the front door began to turn. Click, 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 all by themselves. But they weren't unlocking to let something out. They were unlocking to let something in. The hallway mirror at the far end, which I had covered with a sheet, began to bulge. The fabric strained as something pressed against it from the other side. Not a shape, but a shifting, shadowy mass. The sheet slid to the floor. The mirror's surface didn't show my terrified reflection. It showed a long, dark hallway stretching into infinity, lined with countless women, their faces twisted in silent screams. And at the end of that impossible hallway, something was moving. Something that was all sharp angles and hungry darkness, scuttling towards the glass, towards my world. The last candle went out. I was in pitch blackness. The only light came from the mirror itself, a sickly, greenish glow that illuminated the thing as it reached the surface. A long, bone-white hand pressed against the glass from the inside. A hairline crack splintered out from its fingertips with a sound like a gunshot. I didn't think. I acted, remembering my grandmother's journal. I did the only thing it said might work if the boundary failed. I didn't run. I turned my back on the mirror, on the breaking glass, on the cold breath on my neck. I closed my eyes tightly, and I began to hum a lullaby I suddenly remembered from a dream. A melody my grandmother must have sung to me as a child. I poured every ounce of will, every memory of light and warmth I had left, into that simple, shaky tune. I refused to see. I refused to acknowledge. I don't know how long I stood there. The scuttling stopped. The whispers faded to a faint sobbing. The pressure in the room lessened. When I finally dared to open my eyes, gray dawn light was filtering through the transom. The mirror was just a mirror, showing my own pale, tear-streaked face. The sheet was back on the floor. The salt was scattered, but the door was still locked. I am still here. I am the keeper now. I follow the rules without exception. The whispers are quieter these days, more resigned. Sometimes, at night, I see the velvet covers on the mirrors sway gently. as if someone is pacing just behind them. I've stopped trying to leave Briar's End. The house won't allow it. My car won't start. The road into town always seems to loop back here. The delivery drivers leave packages at the gate, their eyes wide with an instinctive fear they can't explain. I write this not as a warning, but as a record, a confession. The horror isn't in the thing trying to get in. The horror is in the slow, certain realization that you are the lock. And a lock, no matter how strong, is only ever a temporary measure. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know the feeling I live with every day. If you want to hear more tales from the edge of the unknown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey into the dark. And in the comments below, I'm curious, have you ever inherited something, an object, or even just a story that came with a weight you never expected? What was it? Let's talk in the comments. Story 2. The night we inherited a different family. I need to confess something. I believe in curses now, not as a superstition, but as a cold, undeniable fact. And ours was written in the dust of a house we never asked for. My name is Ava, and 3 months ago, my brother Tyler and I inherited our great aunt Alara's cabin. The lawyer's letter called it a quaint woodland retreat, a phrase that now tastes like ash and lies. Tyler, ever the pragmatic one, saw it as a financial lifeline. We sell it, split the profit, and finally get out from under our student loans. Edie said, his voice buzzing with a hope I couldn't share. I just felt a deep, cold pull in my gut, like a fishhook lodged behind my navel, tugging me north. Wed, never met Aunt Alara. She was the family ghost long before she died, the whispered about spinster who lived off-grid in the pine forests of the Upper Peninsula. Our parents mentioned her only in the past tense, even when she was alive. Cabin came with a single, bizarre condition in the will. We had to spend one full night there together before any sale could be finalized. A formality, the lawyer assured us. A quirk. So we went. The drive up was beautiful in a desolate way. Autumn had stripped the trees to skeletal fingers, scratching at a low, gray sky. The town nearest the cabin was a gas station and a post office. The final 10 miles were on a logging road, so overgrown, it seemed the forest was actively trying to swallow the path back. And then there it was. It wasn't the crooked, haunted house structure it pictured. It was a low, sturdy thing of dark-stained logs, nestled against a wall of pines so thick they cast a perpetual twilight. It looked watchful. The first unsettling detail was the silence. No birds, no insects, just the oppressive, woolly quiet of a soundproof room. The second was the smell. Not decay or mildew, but a sharp, clean scent like ozone and pine sap, so strong it made my eyes water. The third was the door. It was unlocked. The heavy iron key the lawyer gave us was useless. Guess she wasn't big on security. Tyler shrugged, pushing it open. The interior was obsessively neat, frozen in a 1970s time capsule. Shag carpet the color of dried blood, wood-paneled walls, and furniture draped in dusty white sheets. It was cold, a deep chill that our rattling old furnace couldn't touch. We found no photos of family, no personal mementos, just books, shelves and shelves of them, many in languages I didn't recognize, with cracked leather bindings and symbols tooled into the spines that made my head ache if I looked too long. In the center of the main room was a large, circular rug woven with a complex, spiraling pattern. It felt like the quiet eye of a storm. Creepy, but probably worth a fortune to some recluse, Tyler declared, trying to sound upbeat. He started a fire. I busied myself making coffee on the ancient stove, my skin prickling with the sensation of being examined. The windows, black with night, felt like one-way mirrors. That first night, the sounds began. Not bumps or chains, but whispers. Faint, sibilant, just on the edge of hearing, weaving through the groan of the wind in the pines. They seemed to come from the walls themselves. Tyler heard them too. Probably just the pipes, or mice in the insulation, he said. But his knuckles were white around his mug. We slept in the same room, 2 sleeping bags on the floor. The whispers didn't stop. They formed words, but not in any language. I knew a flowing, consonant-less stream that felt invasive, like something trying to pour itself into my ear. Okay, I have to ask you all something, because this is where my own skepticism completely shattered. What's the weirdest family heirloom or story you've ever inherited? Something that made you question what your family might have been into. Let me know in the comments, because after this, I believe every family has its secrets. Some are just hungrier than others. The next day, we decided to explore the property to distract ourselves. In the cold daylight, the cabin felt less menacing, just lonely. We found a small, locked root cellar behind the house. The padlock was new, shiny against the rusted door. Tyler, ever practical, broke it with a rock. The smell that wafted out was that same ozone pine scent, but concentrated, choking. The cellar wasn't for food. The walls were covered in the same symbols from the books, painted in what looked like black ash. In the center of the dirt floor was a depression, a perfect shallow bowl shape, stained a deep, rusty brown. We left without a word, locking the broken latch as best we could. The false safety of that day was the most dangerous part. By dinner, we were almost laughing about it. Aunt Alara was just a weird old lady with a thing for weird art, Tyler said. Tomorrow, we signed the papers with the lawyer in town, and we're done. One more night. I almost believed him. Almost. The second night, the whispers were louder. They had a direction now, pulling from the main room towards the bedroom hallway. We huddled by the fire, playing cards, jumping at every creak. Around 2 a.m., the temperature in the cabin plummeted. Our breath fogged the air. The fire didn't die, it burned colder, its flames turning a sickly, pale blue, casting no heat. And then the rug moved. large circular rug in the center of the room rippled, not from a draft. It rippled like water, the intricate pattern swirling and reknitting itself into new, unsettling shapes, a staring eye, a gaping maw. A low hum vibrated up through the floorboards, into our bones. "We're leaving." "Now," Tyler whispered, his voice tight with terror. We grabbed our bags and ran for the front door. It was locked. The key wouldn't turn. The back door, the windowsill sealed shut, not jammed, but fused, as if the wood had grown together. We were trapped in the silent, freezing belly of the cabin. The climax wasn't a ghost appearing. It was a change in the very substance of the place. The wood-paneled walls began to breathe. Slowly, rhythmically. The books on the shelves started to bleed a thick, dark sap that dripped and formed more of those symbols on the floor. The whispers coalesced into a single, clear voice inside my head. It wasn't Aunt Alara's. It was something older, hungrier. It spoke in images, not words. It showed me Aunt Alara not as a victim, but as a keeper, a warden. The cabin wasn't her home, it was her prison, and she had spent her life maintaining the locks, the rug, the symbols, the quiet rituals to keep what lived beneath it contained. Her death had weakened the barriers. Our presence, our bloodline, was the final key. It needed a family connection to cross over fully. It wanted to wear us, to use our lives as a doorway into the world. Tyler was screaming, clawing at a window, but the sap was crawling up his ankles, holding him fast. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, a foreign consciousness pushing against my own, rifling through my memories like files. In a flash of panic, I remembered the root cellar, the stained depression, an offering bowl. It needed something from us. Not our lives, not yet. It needed acknowledgement, a welcome, a family welcoming it home. I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped fighting. I turned towards the center of the room, to the undulating rug that was now a vortex of shifting darkness, and I spoke. My voice was not my own. It was a dry rasp. "We are here," I said. The pressure stopped. The hum ceased. The sap receded from Tyler's legs. The cabin fell utterly, profoundly silent. The door clicked open. We didn't speak. We ran. We ran through the black woods, branches whipping our faces, until we found the car. Drove until the sun came up, never looking back. We sold the cabin to a development company for a fraction of its value. They planned to bulldoze it, to build vacation homes. Tyler has started therapy. He says it was a shared hallucination, carbon monoxide poisoning from the old furnace. He's trying to forget. But I know the truth. I can still smell ozone and pine sap when I close my eyes. I wake up sometimes with the taste of old dust and whispers on my tongue. The lawyer called last week. The developers are complaining. Their equipment keeps failing. Workers quit, talking about bad feelings and strange sounds. The site foreman found all the trees around the property line coated in a strange, sticky sap. The deal might fall through. The property might revert to us. And sometimes, in the dead of night, my phone will buzz with a notification from a security app I never installed. It shows a live feed from a camera I don't own. The view is of a dark, empty room with a familiar circular rug on the floor. And on the screen, a single word typed in an elegant, old-fashioned font. Soon. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. It helps more people find these tales. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next journey into the unknown. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in that cabin? Would you have stayed, or would you have run? Story 3. What my grandfather kept in the basement. My grandfather's death was the reason I finally learned the truth about our family. And I wish, with every fiber of my being, that I hadn't. The lawyer's call came on a Tuesday. Marcus Alastair Finch had passed peacefully in his sleep at 92. And as his only living relative, the entirety of his estate, including the remote family cabin in the Adirondacks, now belonged to me. It'd only been there once, as a child of maybe 7, and my sole memory of the place was a profound, gut-churning fear that had me begging my parents to leave after just one night. They dismissed it as an overactive imagination, a reaction to the creaking old woods and the strange animal sounds. Now, 20 years later, with my life in the city, a mess of failed relationships, and a career going nowhere, the cabin felt like a sign, a quiet place to reset, to sort through old man's things, maybe even write that novel I always talked about. The drive up was beautiful, autumn leaves painting the mountains in fire. But as I turned onto the long, unpaved road that led to Finch's Hollow, the beauty turned oppressive. The trees seemed to crowd the sky, their skeletal branches clawing at the clouds. The cabin itself was exactly as I remembered. A 2-story structure of dark, weathered logs hunched against the side of a mountain, looking less built and more like something that had grown there, petrified and malignant. The air smelled of damp pine and something else, something faintly metallic, like old coins. The key the lawyer sent fit the heavy deadbolt, but the door still stuck, as if the frame itself had swollen to keep me out. I shoved it open, the groan echoing into the deep silence within. The main room was a time capsule of the 1970s. Orange shag carpet, a stone fireplace blackened with soot, and a pervasive chill that the weak autumn sun couldn't hope to penetrate. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light cutting through the grimy windows. It was just an old, neglected cabin. That's all. I told myself that as I hauled my bags inside, the floorboards protesting under my weight. The unsettling details were small, easy to rationalize. All the mirrors in the cabin were covered with faded bedsheets, tied securely at the back. In the kitchen, the calendar on the wall was still turned to October 1987, and on the mantel, amidst knickknacks, was was a single, framed photograph of my grandfather as a younger man, standing stiffly before the cabin. He wasn't smiling. Behind him, in the upper window of the cabin, the curtain was parted just enough to show a pale, indistinct shape looking out. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a smudge on the glass. The first night, I lit a fire, trying to push back the cold and the silence. That's when I heard the scratching. It was a soft, persistent sound, like a dog wanting to be let in, but it came from inside the walls, from the basement door. That door was unlike any other in the cabin, solid oak, reinforced with iron bands, and secured by not one, but 3 heavy sliding bolts on the outside. It was locked shut from this side. I remember freezing, a cold sweat prickling my neck. What was so dangerous that it needed to be kept in rather than out? I called out, my voice shaky. Hello. The scratching stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. I spent the next 2 days trying to ignore it, to focus on clearing out drawers of yellowed papers and moth-eaten clothes. But the cabin had a way of wearing me down. The silence was too deep, a physical presence. The shadows in the corners seemed solid, pooling even at noon. It'd catch movement in the periphery of my vision, a flicker by the covered mirror, a shift in the dark hallway, but when I looked, there was nothing. I started sleeping with the fire blazing and a hammer from the tool shed next to my bed. Have you ever been alone somewhere so quiet that your own heartbeat becomes a noise you distrust? That's what it was like. Every creak of the settling timber, every moan of the wind in the chimney felt deliberate, like the house was breathing around me. I found my grandfather's journal on the 3rd day, tucked inside a hollowed-out book on the shelf. Its pages were filled with tight, frantic script. Most of it was mundane weather reports, grocery lists, but then the entries changed. It's getting stronger. The offerings aren't enough anymore. It wants to see itself. It must not see itself. The locks must hold. The promise must be kept. For their safety, for my soul. The final entry, dated the week before he died, was just 2 words, written over and over, until the pen tore through the paper. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. A deep, primal fear, the one id felt as a child, settled in my bones. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a responsibility, a curse, and I had no idea what the rules were. The scratching returned that night, louder, more insistent. It wasn't coming from the basement door anymore. It was coming from inside my bedroom wall. I lay rigid, the hammer's grip slick in my hand, listening to the dry, skittering scrape of something moving slowly, deliberately, through the space between the walls. It stopped right behind my headboard. I didn't breathe. Then, a sound I will hear until the day I die, a wet, guttural whisper, so close it could have been in the room with me. It didn't speak words. It spoke a feeling directly into my mind, a feeling of profound, endless hunger and loneliness. I bolted from the room, spending the rest of the night huddled in my car, the engine and heater running until dawn. The next morning, shamed by my own fear and burning with a desperate need for answers, I decided to face it. The basement. It had to be the source. The offerings my grandfather mentioned. I needed to see. The 3 bolts slid back with deafening metallic shrieks in the silent cabin. The door swung inward on its own, revealing a steep staircase descending into absolute blackness. The smell that wafted up was of wet earth, rot, and that same coppery tang, now overpowering. My flashlight beam cut a weak path through the gloom as I descended. The basement was a small, raw dirt cellar, and in the center of the dirt floor, surrounded by a ring of salt that had been mostly scuffed away, was a hole. It was about 3 feet wide, perfectly round, and descended into darkness deeper than my light could penetrate. Arranged around it like some grotesque shrine were objects: a tarnished silver locket, a child's leather shoe, a handful of modern coins, and at the very edge, a fresh red apple. The offerings. My light trembled over the hole. As I watched, a handful of dirt from the rim trickled down into the void. Something was moving down there, climbing up. A choked sound escaped my throat. I turned and fled back up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I slammed the heavy door shut and threw the bolts, my hands shaking so badly I could barely slide them home. Leaning against the door, gasping, I listened. Nothing. No scratching. No whispers. Just the pounding of my own blood in my ears. For a whole day, there was silence. A heavy, waiting silence, but a silence nonetheless. I dared to hope. Maybe seeing the whole, understanding the ritual, had broken the cycle. Maybe my grandfather's death had ended it. That night, I even managed to sleep, a deep, exhausted slumber. I awoke to moonlight streaming through my window, and to the sound of my own voice. It was coming from the main room. I heard myself say, clear as day, "It's okay. You can come out now." I was paralyzed in bed. I hadn't spoken. I crept to my bedroom door, peering through the crack. The room was moonlit, washed in monochrome blue. And there, standing in the middle of the orange shag carpet, was a figure. It was my height, my build, but its features were indistinct, smudged like a water-damaged photograph. It was looking down at the basement door. With a calm, deliberate motion that I knew was my own habitual gesture, it reached out and slid the first bolt open. The metallic clack echoed like a gunshot. I burst from my room, screaming no. The figure didn't turn. It didn't have a face to turn. It simply slid the second bolt. I launched myself across the room, not at the figure, but at the door, throwing my body against it as the final bolt began to slide. My hands gripped the cold iron, holding it in place. The figure's hand-cold and dry as grave dirt closed over mine. It didn't try to push me away. It simply held me there, its head tilting in a mimicry of curiosity. In that moment, the final, horrifying understanding crashed over me. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some creature from a hole. It was a reflection of me, but one that had been trapped in the dark, hungry and alone for decades. My grandfather hadn't been keeping something in the basement. He'd been keeping something from the mirrors, from seeing itself and becoming whole. The thing holding my hand began to change. Its smudged features sharpened, filling in with my own eyes, my own mouth, now curled into a smile I never wear. Its grip became vise-like. I felt a pulling sensation, not on my body, but on my very self, a dizzying, soul-deep suction. With a last, desperate surge of strength, I yanked one hand free, grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, and swung it at the covered mirror on the wall. The glass shattered behind the sheet with a catastrophic crash. The figure holding me flinched, its head snapping toward the sound. Its grip faltered for a fraction of a second. I tore myself away, stumbling backward, and ran. I didn't grab my coat, my phone, my keys. I just ran out into the freezing night, down the mountain road in my socks, the branches tearing at me, driven by pure animal terror. I made it to the main road, flagged down a trucker, and got to a town. I told the police a sanitized version of break-in, a traumatic event. They found nothing at the cabin. No figure, no broken mirror. The sheet was still hung, they said. The basement door was bolted shut. They suggested stress, isolation. I didn't argue. I signed the papers to sell the cabin and everything in it to a development company the next week. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. I am back in my city apartment now. The lights are always on. I've covered every reflective surface of the TV screen, the microwave door, my phone when it's off. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it. A faint, familiar scratching. Not in the walls. It's softer than that. And I've started to notice, when I'm exhausted, when my guard drops, that my reflection in a darkened window doesn't always move when I do. It might linger, just for a second, watching me with a patience born of decades in the dark. It's not in the cabin anymore. It followed me home, and I think it's still hungry. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you are not alone. The unknown is often the most terrifying thing of all. What do you think was in the basement? Have you ever had an experience with something that felt like a twisted reflection of yourself? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to help this channel explore more dark tales and unsolved mysteries, please hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Stay curious, but maybe check your mirrors tonight. Story 4. The night I inherited my grandfather's cabin. I should have known that anything my grandfather left me would come with a price. My name is Ava, and up until last month, my life was a predictable cycle of spreadsheets, lukewarm coffee, and city noise. Then the lawyer's letter arrived, informing me I was the sole beneficiary of my reclusive grandfather's estate. A remote cabin, deep in the Adirondack woods, and a small, locked metal box. I hadn't seen him since I was 10, and my memories were a blur of pipe smoke, stern silence, and the feeling that the dark pines outside his windows were watching us. I decided to treat it as a forced vacation, a chance to unplug and maybe sell the place. The drive up was beautiful, the air crisp and pine-scented, but the closer I got, the more the silence felt heavy, like a held breath. The cabin itself was exactly as I remembered, a sturdy 2-room structure of dark logs, nestled in a clearing that sunlight struggled to penetrate. The first odd detail was the key. It wasn't under the mat or on a ledge. It was hanging from a rusted nail driven deep into the trunk of an ancient, gnarled oak directly opposite the front door, as if someone or something needed to always keep the entrance in sight. The second was the smell. Not must or decay, but a sharp, coppery odor like wet pennies and ozone that lingered in the bedroom despite the clean sheets. The third was the complete absence of any wildlife. No bird song, no squirrels chattering, not even insects buzzing against the windows. The woods were monumentally, unnervingly still. I settled in, telling myself the quiet was a blessing. The metal box from the lawyer was on the rough-hewn kitchen table. It was cold to the touch, sealed with a simple padlock for which there was no key. Contents to be reviewed on the premises, the instructions read. I tried a hammer, a crowbar I found in the shed, but the lock wouldn't budge, not even a scratch. That first night, I lay in the narrow bed, listening to the absolute silence until I heard it. A slow, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch coming from the outside wall, right behind my head. It sounded like a thick branch being dragged along the logs. My blood turned to ice. I lay paralyzed until dawn, the scratching stopping only when the first gray light filtered through the trees. The next day, in the harsh, revealing sunlight, I convinced myself it was just a tree. I found the shed, a leaning structure behind the cabin. Inside, amidst rusty tools, was a journal, my grandfather's. The entries started normally with her, would chop it but grew increasingly frantic. The marks are back on the door, one entry read. It knows I can hear it. It mimics. Last night it used Sarah's voice. Sarah was my grandmother, who died before I was born. The lock on the box is the only thing it respects. The pact is in the box. Do not open it. Do not acknowledge it. It feeds on fear and invitation. The final entry, scribbled in a shaky hand, was just 3 words. It's inside now. All right, before I go on, I have to ask you all something. What's your biggest fear? Is it something tangible, like heights or spiders? Or is it that deeper, more primal fear of something you can't see? Something that watches you from the dark? Let me know in the comments. For me, it was always the latter, and in that cabin, I was about to meet it face to face. That night, armed with the journal and a new, crawling dread, I tried to stay awake. The scratching returned, but this time it was on the roof, a skittering, heavy weight moving from one end to the other. Then it stopped, thicker than before. And then a whisper right against my ear on the pillow. Ava let me in. It wasn't my grandfather's voice. It was mine. It was my own voice, but frayed and hollow, echoing as if from a deep well. I clamped my hands over my mouth, stifling a scream. The false safety came the next morning. I decided to leave. I threw my stuff in the car, my hands trembling so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. The engine cranked, died. Tried again. Nothing but a sickly click. The battery was completely dead, though it was new. The cabin, the woods, they were holding me. I spent the day in a haze of terror, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the metal box. The pact is in the box. It respects the lock. As dusk fell, the activity escalated. Knocks echoed from inside the walls, a hollow, mocking drumbeat. The coppery smell became overwhelming, clogging my throat. Shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, to pulse. I heard footsteps pacing in the attic I didn't have. Then, the back door which I had deadbolt had creaked open. I saw nothing there, just the deepening twilight of the clearing. But from the doorway, a footprint formed in the dust on the floorboards. Then another and another, coming towards me. The air temperature plummeted. I backed against the table, my hand hitting the cold metal of the box. In that moment of sheer, mindless panic, a terrible, logical thought cut through. My grandfather said it respected the lock. What if opening it wasn't an invitation to it, but a revocation of its invitation to be here? What if the pact was a way to send it back? It was the desperate gamble of a trapped animal. I grabbed the hammer, raised it over the padlock, and hesitated. What if I was wrong? The footsteps in the dust were 5 feet away. I could see the depressions forming, one after another. The air crackled with static. I brought the hammer down. The lock shattered with a sound like breaking bone. The lid flew open on its own. Inside was no paper, no pact. There was only a small, black, polished river stone and a hand mirror, its glass dark and smoky. The moment the lid opened, everything stopped. The footsteps ceased. The oppressive weight lifted. The coppery smell vanished, replaced by the normal scent of pine and old wood. I sobbed with relief, clutching the edge of the table. It was over. The lock was broken, and whatever it was gone. I had done it. I took a deep, shuddering breath and looked into the dark mirror, half expecting to see some sign of my victory. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed. And then my reflection smiled. A smile I wasn't making. A cruel, knowing curl of the lips that never reached my eyes, which remained terrified. It winked at me. The stone in the box began to vibrate, emitting a low, subaural hum that I felt in my teeth. The voice, now clear and omnipresent, filled the room, not from a single direction, but from everywhere at once. It was still my voice. "Thank you," it sighed, a sound of profound satisfaction. The lock wasn't to keep me out, Ava. It was to keep me in. Now we can go anywhere. The last thing I saw before the world dissolved into a screaming, rushing vortex of shadows and fractured light was my own hand, moving without my command, picking up the smooth, black stone and slipping it into my pocket. I woke up in my car. The engine started on the first try. I drove for 12 hours straight, back to my apartment, back to my life. I threw the stone into the river. I broke every mirror in my home. I tried to tell myself it was a psychotic break, brought on by isolation and grief I didn't know I had. But the city doesn't sound the same anymore. The noise is just a thin veil, and underneath, I can sometimes hear that same profound, hungry silence from the woods. And late at night, when I'm exhausted and my guard is down, I'll catch myself whispering things I don't mean in a voice that is almost, but not quite, my own. The worst part is, I think it's learning. It's learning how to be me so it can go anywhere. And when it's ready, I don't think I'll be the one looking out from behind my eyes anymore. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we inherit. If you enjoyed this tale of dark family secrets and supernatural horror, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the unknown. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done with that locked box? Would you have opened it? Thank you for being here tonight. If this story helped you relax, don't forget to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. Sharing this with your friends helps the channel grow and brings these stories to more late-night listeners. Now, let the rain take over.